Wait, you're what? Anne Hathaway's landlord barges her way through the door, pushing Anne in the process.
You have 24 hours to vacate, Miss Hathaway,
the landlord says, procuring a document from her back pocket and presenting it to her. Anne takes the document and looks sternly at the lady before crossing the room to retrieve her reading glasses from an end table. You're seriously evicting me? For what reason?
I'm moving back in,
she says firmly. Anne removes her reading glasses. You're moving back in? I thought you lived in Cabo with your husband.
Yeah, well, he left me for some college dropout with perky tits. I walked in on them.
She struggles to find the proper word.
Fornicating.
Anne crosses the room and places a hand on her landlord's shoulder. She is, after all, an empath. Oh, Cheryl, I am so sorry to hear that, she says as she guides Cheryl to the sofa. The two sit down and Anne hands her a Kleenex.
He kicked me out, and now I have nowhere else to go,
Cheryl says as a snot bubble bursts from her nostril. Anne sits back and considers her situation. She's just finished filming Robert Zemeckis' adaptation of Roald Dahl's The Witches for HBO Max, and, well, she doesn't really have anything else booked. Though she has been in 16 films since announcing her retirement from acting following Les Miserables, she has struggled and begged for every single one. Her grandmother, Julie Andrews, would be proud to know that her granddaughter is one of the hardest working actresses in Hollywood. Hardest working at booking a job, that is. What Anne Hathaway really needs is a rebirth. She knows it, America knows it, and most importantly, her agent knows it and blatantly told her as much after berating her for her poor performance financially. Cheryl excuses herself to the restroom. As Anne had been daydreaming and pondering, Cheryl's quiet tears had become wild sobs as she remembered the sight of her husband balls deep in a college student. Anne, now undisturbed to think only of herself, leans back into the couch and settles into low power mode, that dissociative state where you just exist and stare into space. Perhaps, she thinks, she could write something about Cheryl. Perhaps, she considers, Cheryl could move in with Anne instead of evicting her. Then, Anne would have more time to study her for what exactly would come later. A film, most likely, as she doesn't do much television. Powering back up, Anne stands and goes to the first floor powder room where Cheryl sobs. Knock, knock, she says when she reaches the threshold of the door.
Go away, Anne Hathaway, please,
Cheryl says with a tear in her voice.
I was just thinking, Cheryl,
there's only 2 months left on my lease, and, well, maybe you could just move in with me, you know? And maybe we could... Have you seen my performance in The Princess Diaries too? Cheryl sniffles.
I think so. Is that the one with Raven from That's So Raven?
Anne smiles. Everyone loves Princess Diaries, she says to herself as reassurance. That's precisely the one, she says. What do you say we have an old-fashioned slumber party? We could even mattress surf. Cheryl pauses for a second.
Is that from the film? I'm sorry, I've only seen it once.
Yeah, it's no big deal, but it's, I'd say it's the most iconic scene from the movie, Anne says, then quickly, not trying to shame you, just saying that if you ask somebody about TPD2, that's what we called it, sorry, if you ask someone about TPD2, they'd probably mention mattress surfing. Cheryl opens the bathroom door.
It sounds fun,
she says. She pauses for a second and then lunges at Anne and wraps her in a giant bear hug.
Thank you for showing me kindness in this dark, dark time.
Anne, thinking to herself, ew, 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 makes her first character note about Cheryl. She's a hugger. Did you spill my cat's ashes? Anne shoves open Cheryl's bedroom door to find her drunk on the floor, naked. Jesus Christ, Cheryl, again? Clothes strewn about, blinds askew, and ass and legs covered in what seems to be explosive diarrhea, Cheryl tosses and turns fitfully in a pile of her sheets.
Ugh, it's not straight.
She tries to pull the sheet to the correct orientation, but can't seem to get it right.
Fuck!
She still doesn't notice Anne in the doorway as she stands up and spreads the sheet out on the floor. "Cheryl!" Anne yells. "Huh?" Startled, Cheryl spins and falls to the floor, slamming her head onto it as she does. The blow knocks her out instantly, and Anne Hathaway sprints across the room. "Cheryl!" She crouches and checks Cheryl's pulse. Still alive. She pulls her cell phone out and dials 911. Before she presses send, she yells out, "Oh shit, wait!" and runs to get her journal to take notes. She returns to Cheryl's bedroom and takes notes of everything. The condition of the room, the number of bottles of alcohol, the smell of Cheryl's feces. All of it would be invaluable during her rehearsal process. God, she is so going to win her second Oscar. Anne bends down and admires Cheryl unconscious on the floor when she starts having a violent seizure. "Oh, fuck," Anne says. She grabs her phone and calls 911 while Cheryl slams her head repeatedly into the ground beneath her in violent seizes. Anne rushes back over and shoves her wallet in Cheryl's mouth. She's pretty sure this is what you're supposed to do. Anne gives the operator the address and hangs up. "Stay with me, Cheryl. Hang in there," she says as Cheryl continues to seize and seize. Cheryl's body, so tense and pushed to the absolute limit, suddenly becomes limp and lifeless. "Cheryl?" Anne slaps her across the face a few times, places her ear to her heart, and listens. Nothing. She frantically checks her pulse. Nothing. "Cheryl? Oh shit. Oh fuck. Oh shit." Anne paces back and forth when a knock rings out from the front door. "Open up! Fulton County EMS!" a voice bellows. Anne instantly snaps into some mode she'd never experienced until this point. Almost like a robot, she processes a plan almost instantaneously. She quickly rips an antique quilt down from a display rack on her wall and drapes it over Cheryl's dead body. She races to the full-length mirror in the hallway and squeezes her nipples ferociously, enough to bring tears to her eyes. Playing into it, using her Meisner training, Anne dips into the worst memory of her life. All those mean bullies during Les Mis. And the tears spring forth as she opens the door. "Oh, thank God you're here! I'm having chest pains! Oh, woe is me! Oh, woe is me!" Anne Hathaway says as she places the back of her hand daintily to her forehead and falls into the paramedic's outstretched arms. "Holy shit! You're Anne Hathaway," he says as he catches her. "Dude, look! It's Anne Hathaway! Hand me my phone!" The paramedic's partner slaps him upside the back of the head. "Dude, she's passing out! We gotta get her to the hospital! We can take pics with her in the ambulance." And with that, the first paramedic hoists Anne by the armpits, the second grabs her feet, they both pull the door shut and load her into the ambulance. "Well, Miss Hathaway, I must say, you've made a remarkable recovery," the paramedic says before they've even left the driveway. I know. It's just that, like you said, it's probably hunger," he says, finishing her sentence, trying to fall in love with her. "Right. And you gave me those graham crackers and just, checked me out and I'm really feeling a lot better," Anne says, smiling and wiping leftover tears from her eyes. The two paramedics exchange a couple glances and eyebrow raises, but ultimately they let her go. They can't force her to go to the hospital after all. They did, however, force her to pose for a few selfies. Anne races back inside and locks the door. She quickly runs through the house and draws all the curtains and blinds. She climbs the staircase and pauses outside Cheryl's bedroom, unsure of what her next move should be. Grabbing the doorknob, she goes inside and quickly shuts the door behind her. Hi, Cheryl," Anne says, still staring at the back of the door. She takes a quick glance at the quilt and then back. So sorry about what happened." She slowly backs up one step at a time. I really, I don't want to have to defile your corpse or anything. Everybody deserves a proper burial. She crouches down next to the quilt. I was thinking, maybe in a nice nature preserve somewhere. Yeah, that sounds nice. What do you think, Cheryl? She reaches over and pulls the quilt, only to find Cheryl's body nowhere to be found. What the? Anne Hathaway jumps to her feet and races to the door. Flinging it open, she finds Cheryl standing with her journal in her hand. Anne shrieks at the top of her lungs, "Holy shit, Cheryl! You're... oh my god, you're... holy shit! You're okay! Woohoo!"
You've been studying me?
Cheryl says, clearly upset. She raises the journal above her head.
Deranged? Drunk? Naive? I thought we were friends, Anne Hathaway.
Cheryl starts to cry and rub the back of her head, which Anne can see is still bleeding. I'm so sorry, Cheryl. Your life would make such a compelling vehicle for me to star in. You have to understand my predicament, Cheryl. Really, you do, Anne says, a tear falling down her cheek.
No, I don't. Anne Hathaway, that first night we lived together, you pulled the mattress right off my heart and surfed right in. I thought you wanted to be my friend, and I mean, I'd be lying if I said I never sniffed your panties.
What the fuck, Cheryl? You wonder why I write deranged? You're sniffing my panties and what? Touching yourself? Is that what you do, Cheryl? Anne questions. Cheryl blushes.
Sometimes,
she answers. Anne wasn't expecting that answer. She too blushes and crosses the room. What the fuck is happening to me, Cheryl? Anne asks.
Are you feeling it too?
Cheryl answers with a question of her own. Anne Hathaway pounces on Cheryl and rips her top off and has her way with her for a solid 45 minutes. Cheryl screams when she orgasms. It's primal, like perhaps she never has. Ooh, and you know what? That would fit in perfectly with that remark she made a few weeks ago about Richard's penis being too small for her. Cheryl's vagina is unkempt. She doesn't seem to have paid much attention to it in the time since her divorce. We'll need to keep that in mind for wardrobe, maybe grow out my own. Cheryl has the cellulite and dimples on her ass of a woman twice her age. I faked the whole thing. Cheryl wakes up a few hours later to the smell of baking cooking. She can't believe what happened last night. She made a celebrity come! And such a hot one, too. Cheryl can't wait to get downstairs and kiss Anne. She quickly brushes her teeth and shuffles downstairs.
Good morning,
she says as she wraps her arms around Anne Hathaway's waist and snuggles into her neck. Anne cringes to herself as she says, "Ah, there she is." She quietly shrugs away Cheryl by spinning her around and showing her the breakfast spread out on the table. "Surprise!"
Oh, goodness, Anne, you didn't have to,
Cheryl says with a smile and tears in her eyes. She leans in for a kiss, but Anne turns so it lands on her cheek. "Canker sore," she says, and quickly serves Cheryl a cup of coffee. Once they both serve themselves a plate of breakfast, they sit down across from each other at the breakfast table.
So
they both say at the same time. Anne smiles. "You go first," she says. She stirs her coffee and takes a sip. Still too hot. She takes a bite of eggs as Cheryl struggles to speak. "Everything okay?" Anne says, sitting up.
Yeah.
Cheryl says,
I'm so sorry for how I've acted the last few months. I was always drinking and fucking up the house, and I tried to evict you. And all you've done is show me love and kindness. And after last night, you've awakened something inside me that I never knew existed. You've made me whole. You're the reason I've been able to wake up in the morning for the last 6 months. You're the person I'm most excited to see, and the person I always want to be with. And you're Anne fucking Hathaway!
She laughs and smiles.
I just can't believe my good fortune. They always say when one door closes, another one opens.
Cheryl finishes. Anne raises her mimosa. Cheers to that. She takes a swig and laughs uncomfortably.
There was something you wanted to say, my love?
Cheryl asks. Well, Anne says, in that same spirit, when one door closes, another one opens,
What do you mean, Anne?
Cheryl asks, starting to feel nervous. It's just that, well, Cheryl, you saw my notebook. You know that didn't mean anything to me. I only let you come here to observe you. I didn't want to be your friend. I still don't. You're boring, Cheryl. My God.
I'm boring?
Yes, Cheryl. Jesus God. You don't have to read every billboard we drive past. You don't have to try to answer every Jeopardy question when you clearly don't know the answer. And you don't have to read chapter books with your pointer finger, Anne explodes. Cheryl stares at her in silence. Anne stares back and takes a bite of bacon.
What about last night?
Cheryl asks pitifully. Anne slides her notebook open to last night's journal entry across the table. Cheryl looks it over and then sits back in her chair, defeated. Anne stands up and crosses to her. Cheryl, I want to tell your story. I want to tell our story. Cheryl looks at Anne, confused.
Our story?
She asks. Yeah, the story of how I met a crazy, psychopathic lesbian who fell in love with me and stalked me, Anne says with a demented smile.
You wouldn't say that about me.
Cheryl says, devastated. Oh, I would. I think I'll tell them about how you sexually assaulted me and, oh my goodness. I had to throw you off of me in self-defense. Yes, it's all coming to me, Anne writes in her notebook.
But none of that's true,
Cheryl says as tears well up in her eyes again. Oh, it won't matter, Cheryl. It'll be such a great film. I can see the praise now. Anne Hathaway imagines an upcoming appearance on Ellen in which she won't be allowed to look Ellen in the eyes, but she will be able to plug her show to more Oscar voters.
I'm leaving. And if you ever try to make a movie using my name or my likeness, well, I'll sue you,
she says. In an instant, Anne Hathaway snaps back into that robotic autopilot mode and breaks into action. She bolts across the room, lunges through the doorway, careens across the hall to the top of the staircase where she collides into Cheryl, sending her tumbling headfirst down the stairs. Anne watches in what feels like slow motion as Cheryl tumbles again and again, slamming her head and neck into almost every stair on the way down, finally slamming to a halt on the hard tile floor of the foyer full force into her neck, snapping it instantly. Anne Hathaway smiles and looks at Ellen's right ear. That's so fun, Ellen. I love dancing every time I come out here.
Wow, you're so pretty. Oh, don't kill me in self-defense. I'm not some crazy stalking lesbo.
Ellen says. The audience laughs hysterically. Anne just chuckles and says, yeah, while Ellen puts up pictures of Cheryl and Anne on the big screen behind her.
I gotta say, this movie looks so great. And I hear you've got some buzzing going on.
Ellen says as a loud buzzing sound effect begins playing over the loudspeakers. The joke goes right over Anne's head. Buzzing? She asks. Oscar buzz! Suddenly, a man in a bee suit appears to scare Anne. Anne plays along and screams and pretends that she was scared. End. That was Anne Hathaway's Landlord. Now, sometimes I'll have these random ideas that'll just come to me as I'm going to bed, or sometimes, like, I'll wake up in the middle of the night, and I'll have just, or as I'm falling asleep, laying there trying to fall back asleep, I'll just come up with some random idea, sort of like the just idea Anne Hathaway's Landlord. And I'm laying there, and I that idea comes to my brain, and I'm like, that's something. That's certainly an Audio Tales story. So I'm so lazy because it's probably, I mean, fuck, I'm not even going to say it's like 1 in the morning. It's probably like 10:30 p.m. And I've already been asleep maybe for like an hour, sort of, like falling, in that little sort of twilight stage where you're falling asleep, but you haven't fallen asleep yet. And this idea comes to me, and I'm sitting there, and I'm too lazy to even reach over the 3 centimeters to get to my phone on my nightstand. So I lay there in bed, and I just repeat to myself over and over and over again, Anne Hathaway's Landlord, 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 as if it's some sort of mantra to try to get it ingrained in my brain, because I knew it was an idea worth keeping. I just knew that it would turn into something, and I think it turned into a pretty entertaining story, so I think I was justified in trying to grill it into my brain. I don't know why I wouldn't just lean over and get my phone, but you know how it is when you're tired. You don't want to do anything. You're falling asleep. You don't want to just do anything that would disturb you falling asleep. So I'm laying there repeating it in my brain, repeating it in my brain, repeating it in my brain. And sort of recently, a recurring theme in my life, if you've been listening to the Return of Motafe, our weekly podcast, new episodes every Sunday, wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the like. It was sort of there's been a recurring theme in my life recently where I've been peeing too much in the night. So the opportunity came to write down the idea when I finally felt that urge to go pee again, probably 15 minutes after I laid down in bed. I get up, and I'm like, well, this is it. I take my phone with me, I go to the bathroom, I start writing Anne Hathaway's Landlord, middle of the night while I'm peeing. That's how it all began, folks.
I'm just a small town boy from Appalachia.